Kaitlin Tremblay, what is your favourite game?
My favorite game is Shining Force. I've been playing games since I've more or less been alive. So I grew up with two older brothers, and they were really into video games. And so from the moment that I think I could hold a controller, I've been playing games.
What was your kind of first experience of a game?
Actually, my first experience of a game was Shining Force, because it was released in 1992, and I would have been about 4 then. So I remember, because Shining Force is a first-player game. Or a one-player game. And so I remember my oldest brother would make my middle brother watch him play, and then when he was done, my middle brother would make me play, or make me watch him play. And so my first kind of experience was watching them and learning secrets and like learning little cheats and stuff like that from them, and then getting to go and play the game all on my own and kind of do it by myself, and making my friends watch me and make them see how cool I was.
So there was no kind of Nintendo, PlayStation experience around that time?
No, it was all Sega for me. I actually didn't get into PlayStation until about PlayStation 3, admittedly. But we played all the Sega games, and we had all the consoles from Genesis to Dreamcast to Saturn, and so we were a really big Sega family.
Hardcore Sega fanboys.
Yeah.
And fangirl, must be said. What kind of PlayStation 2 exclusives were you playing at the time? Because I remember us kind of just chatting about it just then.
Mostly the Silent Hill games, actually. When I finally got my hands on a PlayStation 3 that had reverse compatibility, I got whichever Silent Hill games I could get my hands on for it.
Ah, okay. I can't say I've played Silent Hill 2, because the only kind of game in the series I've played is Silent Hill 3, and that is excellent.
Yes.
Have you played PT at all?
I have not. I will one day. I just have a big backlog of other games that I'm working through right now.
Ah, okay. Well, I wouldn't dare touch PT. Too scary, even for me. I don't mind horror games, but there's a limit.
Well, that is intriguing.
So basically, how did you get into the industry then?
Well, I kind of fell sideways into the industry because it happened. I finished my master's in 2011, and I had moved back home to my mom's because I wasn't really sure what I was doing and where I was going to end up. And so at that time, a friend of mine, Carl Perry-Kennings, who I had done my creative writing bachelor's with, had messaged me and told me that him and a couple friends in British Columbia were going to start up a video game critical website, and he was wondering if I would be a writer for it. So I figured I didn't really have anything else going on at the time, and I loved games, and I loved nerd culture, and I loved writing, so I figured I would give it a shot. And then I've just kind of stuck ever since. Not stuck, but immersed.
Just there is no escape, basically.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have it any other way, so. Talk about your kind of experience with a project that a mutual friend of ours has been doing for the past couple of years. He's someone I've had on the show last season, in fact, of course, Alan Williamson, who spoke about Sonic, Free and Knuckles, and I'm of course referring to 5 out of 10 magazine. So just talk about your experience on that. It was kind of a funny story because last year before the summer, Alan had opened up pitches to submit a pitch to 5 out of 10, and I had pitched him a couple ideas, and one of them involved talking about the video game Unreal and what I really loved about that game. And so he read it over and he liked it, but he said, unfortunately, I don't think you should talk about Unreal for 5 out of 10. He's like, but that's only because I think that you and I should write a book about it together. And it was amazing and it was fun, and so that's kind of how that whole thing blossomed. And then after writing the book together,
it just kind of worked out that he needed a managing editor and I was up for the job, and so I came on board as the managing editor.
Unfortunately, you didn't last very long, though, did it? Unfortunately.
No, and that was due to a bunch of personal reasons and my inability to prioritize projects and to not take on more than I could handle. So unfortunately, I had to step down just in terms to manage my personal and professional workload.
Without having spoken to Alan about it, like, have you pitched anything else since the 5 out of 10? Just kind of.
I have not actually, but I did see he's opening up submissions again, so possibly we'll see.
Oh, okay. Well, that'd be cool to see. So, of course, you just mentioned it in part there. You and Alan wrote a book on Unreal, which is called Escape to Nepali. So just talk about that experience of crafting together Nepali.
Oh, writing the book on Unreal is the best. Unreal is a game that I hold very dearly in my heart. As I had mentioned earlier, a lot of my early gaming experience was based off playing hand-me-down games for my brothers, and games that I learned the secrets and learned the story through by watching them. But neither of my brothers had actually gotten really into Unreal. And so it kind of became the first game that I was able to explore on my own and became my own little secret. And when you live in a house with two older brothers, there's really no alone time ever. And so Napali became my own little refuge where I could go and explore and discover and not feel like the little sister. And so writing a book on it was a great way for me to kind of relive those experiences and kind of an ode to little 10-year-old Kate.
That really sounds like a most fantastic experience. Is that, kind of hearing about Alan's experiences from it kind of inspires me to do something similar for one of my own favourite games, like maybe The Last of Us or Metal Gear Solid 3. Although, to be fair, that Metal Gear Solid 3 is kind of 10 years old next month in Europe, and Last of Us is fairly recent, so I can't really say it's not worth looking back on a book just yet. But yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I think you should if you want to, because I really encourage long form criticism of games in general, because I feel like the book format gives people a lot of room to really explore aspects of why a game speaks to them in a way that other formats don't allow. And I've been reading a lot of video game books lately, and it's just getting to see both the critic's personality interwoven with the game is a really, really unique kind of reading experience. So I say do it.
What other kind of books have you been reading? Game book, criticism books?
Oh, I just read John Irwin's Super Mario Brothers 2, and it was really fun to read and just to learn about all of the secret world of Super Mario Brothers 2 and just the context surrounding it, and kind of personalize it a lot more than just this canonical game.
Let's get into your favourite game then, Shining Force. You already mentioned how you first got into it, so we don't need to go over that. But as someone who was basically a year old when Shining Force came out, give me the elevator pitch. If I was someone going into the game for the first time, like, what is Shining Force?
It is a top-down, turn-based strategy RPG game, and it is the best game ever made.
Short but sweet, I like it. One of the main aspects of Shining Force was that it had this kind of fantasy theme bleeding with kind of sci-fi elements. How did you find that?
It's one of my favorite things about the game, because it's this really cool blend of the fantasy aesthetic with the technological capabilities of sci-fi. And so you later on in the game you recruit a character named Adam who's a robot, and we'll have to use different machinery, and it's a really neat blend of seeing mages working their magic, but then also figuring out how to work teleportation devices. and so it really creates this unique world that isn't just your typical RPG fantasy because it speaks to this kind of almost alternate universe that it takes place in rather than our traditional world.
That's an interesting kind of theme to go around, like especially for a game of that kind of caliber for its time, anyways.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about it is that it's never really put into context and timeline, and so by the aesthetic of Shining Force, you would imagine it would be a medieval game taking place in the typical era with dragons and mages and magic. But then you also get heavy machinery and giant trains that move off steam engines, and it's never really discussed. It's never really put into context. It's just when you search, it's just, oh, this strange piece of machinery or this strange item, and your character doesn't know what it is, and it's never explained. But in Shining Force 2, they try to give it a little bit more context, and so they refer to all this machinery as from the ancients, which is really cool if you think about it in terms of this is our future rather than our past.
So it just basically kind of eschews that the typical RPG or JRPG tropes where everything is just fantasy.
Yeah, it's 97% fantasy with these little undercurrents of sci-fi, but I feel like the little undercurrents thematically and narratively take on a really huge significance. Like the importance is always in the details, right? And you can't ignore the fact that this evil dark force is being raised by alchemy, but the alchemy is really just fusing two swords together using our technology that we have now.
So like this came out at a time where Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest were starting to kind of build momentum in Japan. Of course, Final Fantasy was supposedly meant to be Sakaguchi's last game if it didn't go well, of course. But as it turns out, Final Fantasy did the business, and of course, as I said, it was at a time where Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest were starting to kind of build momentum in Japan. Anyway, so like, how much of an influence do you think those games may have had on Shining Force?
I feel like the influence had to have been great. I mean, like, I don't think you could create a game in that context and not be influenced by the aesthetics and by the reception that those games were getting. And I mean, Shining Force is narrative is exactly that kind of grandiose, we have to save the world from evil forces, good versus bad, that those narratives are.
Like, have you played any of the Final Fantasy games, or certainly the early Final Fantasy games before 7?
Yes, I've played a little bit of 3 and 6.
Ah, okay. What about Dragon Quest?
I don't think I actually played any Dragon Quest.
Ah, okay.
I mean, like, I know of it, but I don't think it was ever a game that I came across.
Oh, okay. Like, we talked about of how maybe the Shining Force would have been influenced by Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, but there's perhaps also could be said that it's also been influenced by Fire Emblem as well, which each character kind of having its own personality as well.
Absolutely, and the different classes and just I think everything about it, they're very similar games.
Like, what did you think about that kind of concept at the time? Like, each character having its own personality and background.
Oh, I adored it, especially because your player character is a man, and so having your first mage be Teo, who's a woman with her own unique personality and traits and skills, was really great for me because it was a character I could latch on to and feel more identified with as I played through the game. Because you can name your own characters in this game, and so my brothers named the main character Eric and then Brian, and then I was like, well, I can't name him Kate, so and so I remember naming him like probably one of my crushes at the time or something. and then it was really great to be able to not have to be focused just on identifying with him. I had a whole team that I could relate to and a whole team that I could control and grow attached to and become fond of. And I play favorites like nobody's business in games like Shining Force and Fire Emblem. So it's good for me to have a large cast of characters to relate to.
Was there any more characters in the game that you kind of loved and adored?
Yes, I hated her at the time, but now I have the greatest love and appreciation for Henri. Henri is a mage who you get early on into the game. And as I said before, how Teo was my favorite because Teo was the first woman that I had met in the game and immediately bonded with. Henri is also a mage and is actually better and stronger than Teo. And my brothers would always make fun of me for using Teo and not Henri. And so I grew really begrudging of Henri because she was better than Teo was. And how dare anybody say anything bad about Teo? Um, but having replayed the game 3 times in the past 3 years, I think, Henri, I've really grown to love and appreciate her.
Hmm.
She's not just a maid, she's a princess. But she's not a princess that you rescue. She's this badass white-haired mage who is going to school and who decides that she doesn't want to wait around. She's going to go and help you and fight. And she's incredibly strong, and she's not aesthetically stereotypical of how most games would present a princess at the time. Like, she wears dark black robes and has white hair, and she's just great.
Hmm. Just basically eschews the typical tropes, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
What of the characters that you didn't like in the game?
Um, so you get this hamster named Jogurt, and he wears a helmet.
I'm sorry,
And
what did you just say, hamster?
he's a hamster who
Oh
wears a
my
helmet.
god!
And yeah, and his name's Joker, and he is useless. He's not strong. He has horrible defense. He doesn't have magic. But if you kill an enemy with him, the enemy drops something that is called a Jogurt ring. And if you equip the Jogurt ring to any other character in the game, they would then look like Jogurt. So it was this really bizarre character that was there.
Oh my
I
god!
don't, yeah, just to kind of reference its own, like it's not taking itself so seriously that it can't have this kind of character.
It basically has like character humor with it.
Yeah, exactly, which is really wonderful about.
Oh my god! I can just imagine seeing a small hamster running around this kind of battlefield. It was small, wasn't it? Basically the size of a hamster, or was it just a kind of human-sized hamster?
Well, because of the graphics at the time and everybody's on screen, it takes up 1 tile. So he's technically the same size as your human hair hero.
Oh my god! I'm checking this out on YouTube. I'm going to find videos of these. I'm going to see if this exists for real because I just can't believe it.
But yeah, and that's what's wonderful about Shining Force too, is that you have your typical fantasy character. So you have your human, your mage, your centaur, your dwarf, and then your healers. But then you also have a werewolf and like a floating squid named Domingo, and a robot and birdmen and dragons, and it's a really cool, varied cast of characters with different skills and different appeals to other people. I think as a kid I loved Jogurt.
Just looking back on it now, you just think, what the hell were they thinking putting in a hamster?
Yeah. And he's not a character that you recruit automatically. You have to find him, and he's worth it, I guess.
And just to pick up on something that you said, I'm sorry, did you just say a flaming squid?
Oh, a flying squid.
Oh, flying squid, sorry. I thought I heard
Yeah.
flaming squid. Okay, that makes slightly more sense, like 2% more sense.
Well, you find an egg early on in the game, and then eventually you find somebody who can hatch the egg for you. And then from the egg comes out Domingo, who is this flying squid mage.
Or is it all I've heard basically is that all I've heard so far is that mages are basically Shining Force's main kind of go-to class.
For me, they are. I heavily favor mages, but the classes are actually fairly evenly spread out through characters. And this is something my brothers and I fight over endlessly, is how many of each class to have in your team, because you can only have, I think, 10 or so people. And so I usually try to have 2 or 3 mages, 2 healers, and then the rest just be kind of more brute force warriors, like centaurs or the werewolf or heroes or whatever. So
Just talk a little bit of the story. Like, again, elevator pitch me on the story.
So it takes place in this land called Gardania, and an evil threatens to overtake Gardania, and so you basically have to defend the land against invading devils who are trying to awaken a very old evil called Dark Dragon, who is this giant three-headed dragon. And so throughout the game, you have to fight the opposing army, which is Runefast, and then you eventually learn that Runefast is being controlled by Dark Soul, who's just an evil, awful person who's trying to raise Dark Dragon.
And to be clear, for legal purposes, we're not referring to Namco Bandai's Dark Souls.
No.
So, the reason why I asked this is because there is something unique about the story in Shining Force, and that it's expanded upon a little bit in the remake for the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, with where they take the princess of the evil army and make her the main character, Narsha, right?
Have you played the game at all, like the remake?
I haven't, because I actually don't have the Game Boy Advance, or I never had it growing up.
Okay, well...
And it breaks my heart, because I feel like Narsha would have been a character I would have just fallen in love with.
Okay, well that kind of throws away the redundant questions then. Although, to be fair, you could probably get like a Game Boy Advance for cheap now, basically, somewhere.
That's true, and I could probably find the game. This will become my new obsession.
Console will be easy enough. Game, now that would be the question. Will it be like $1,000 on eBay somewhere?
I will sell my first unborn baby for the remake of Shining Force.
Commitment. I like that. Another kind of big thing with Shining Force is that it kind of has a lack of game over, so it does.
Yeah, because if your main character is killed in battle, then you just get resent back to the priest. Priests are where you heal and save. So you never technically have a game over, although each time you die, it does take away half of your money. So theoretically, if you run out of money.
Okay.
But I've never seen that actually happen. So.
So you've never had a game over?
No, I'm way too good to have a game over. And also, your main character has a magical ability called Egress. So if a battle ever does look like it's going to be the death of you, you can always egress, and then you'll just fly away to town and be safe, and you can redo the battle after you've healed everybody and restocked your item supply.
Just to kind of touch a bit back on the story base then, how did you think? What did you think of Max, the protagonist?
He's pretty generic, no name. I'm a strong dude who's gonna save the world. He's quite admittedly the most boring character in this game, and in many games probably. He doesn't have a personality. He's not allowed to talk. Like, your main interactions or your main ability to speak as Max is two options of a head nodding yes or a head nodding no when you're asked a direct question. Yeah, he has no personality. You're meant to project onto him, but as I explained earlier, I couldn't do that. So
maybe I'm explaining it wrong, but you explained of how, what was it you said that the game wanted you to project you onto Max, right? Or
yeah.
Maybe this is a weird thing to say, but I've always found that in some games the game can project a character onto you. And last year I was playing Metal Gear Solid 3 during what is perhaps the toughest period in my life, and there's a character in it. Like, have you played Metal Gear Solid 3?
I haven't. I actually really don't like the Metal Gear games, but
no, okay, fair enough. Metal Gear Solid 3 was for a while my favourite game, and it was down to perhaps the finest character to ever be written in a game ever, which is quite ironic considering Hideo Kojima's kind of recent treatment of female characters, but I digress, that's a story for another day. And that is the boss, and what an amazing character she was, because of, I guess, her kind of maternal, motherly instinct, and she is this kind of. I want to find the right words for it, but basically she's this badass, strong-willed woman who is just absolutely incredible. So what I guess what I'm trying to say is that can a game project a character trait onto you as well as the other way around?
I think so. I think it depends on how invested into the game's storyline you are yourself. So I remember playing Resident Evil Code Veronica on the Dreamcast and definitely feeling like Claire rather than feeling like Claire is me. So I think there is a way to kind of have that inverse relationship. But I think it so heavily relies on how well written the character is and how invested you are into the game.
So, let's go over the other things that you liked about Shining Force. So, what were those things that you did like about Shining Force, the other things?
Top-down strategy is probably my favorite combat style of any video game. And so I love the board game feel of it. I love being able to take my time and strategize where to put my players and what is the best physical plan of attack. So top-down RPG or top-down strategy like Fire Emblem Awakening is definitely the easiest way to win my heart over if you're a video game. it was to the point where when my brothers and I were kids, we took a bunch of cardboard and cut out squares and converted our living room into a movement grid and then used our X-Men action figures and made our own like 3D board game that way. And so I'm very, very partial to anything that has a top-down movement grid style of play.
Oh wow. I think I should probably bring up at this point then, considering you were your kind of first PlayStation experience was PS3. I have to bring up, did you play Valkyria Chronicles at all?
I did!
Oh my god!
It's so good.
Okay, this podcast of my favourite game is no longer Shining Force, it's about Valkyria Chronicles. Oh.
If only Vulcans had a little bit of a more attractive name.
Exactly. It's a shame they're not, it's a good relation, Shining Force and Valkyria Chronicles are strategy based. What a game Valkyria Chronicles is. I could really ramble on about that for days. Admittedly, I've not finished it for a long, long time. I've still not finished it, but what a game it is.
It gets so hard.
Exactly.
I haven't finished it either, and there are some battles that I've replayed 20 times and would text my partner and be like, if I don't beat it this time, I'm never playing this game ever again because I'm going to break something.
I'm going to eject the disc from the PS3. I'm going to snap it because I just don't give a fuck anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's great, but it is so fucking hard.
It is so hard. It so is, and yet, like idiot that I am, I bought Valkyria Chronicles 2 on the PSP, and yeah, that was a bit of a silly mistake, especially when not completing the first one. Oops.
Oh. You're investing in the series of the franchise, so consider that.
Yeah, definitely. Which kind of makes it a shame that Sega hasn't really seen fit to kind of invest in bringing over Valkyria Chronicles 3.
Yeah.
Which is a massive shame, and in fact for the entire series, because it seems like it's dead now.
Well, and I think the fact that like Sega is the only of like one of the major consoles that isn't still viable today maybe speaks to it being the not greatest at business decisions.
Maybe.
I don't really know much about that history behind it, but
so unfortunately, as much as I would like to have this be about Valkyria Chronicles, we do kind of have to pull it back towards Shining Force.
Anytime.
I kind of pulled you off from what we were talking about in terms of the things you liked about it. So what others were? What were the other elements that you liked about it?
I love the combat first and foremost. I love the characters. I love their arts because they have their little. So there's 3 different arts. That's not a word. There's 3 different. 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 Art. That's not a word. There's 3 different viewings of them. So you have your on-screen character during most of the combat, which is just a little square pixel person that just moves their legs on spot. And then you have their portrait cards when you go into your menu to view their statuses. And the portrait cards are just these really nicely done images, like more drawn, like you can tell the care that they put into developing the uniqueness of each character. And so if you scroll through and you look through each character's portrait card, you just get so much more of the personality that you can't capture in the pixel art of them on the combat field. But then the third is their battle animations, where you get the realistic, their actual to scale size with their fully animated clothing and their maneuvers. And they feel like really fleshed out characters, and that you don't just have one or two views of them. You have this entire construction of how they are, what they look like, how they speak, how they move, and it's really kind of cool. And so I really I like how real the characters feel. And so if you go to your headquarters, because you can only have so many characters in your party at a time. And so if you go to your headquarters, you can go around and talk to everybody who you haven't brought behind. And some people are really sad that you're not fighting with them and will ask you to take them back, whereas others are like, nah, I'm good. I'm just gonna drink at this bar and enjoy being part of something. But no, you go fight. It's cool. And so I like that a lot. I really love the characters.
Mm.
And
Sorry, go on.
no, you ask.
No, go on, please, answer, please.
I was just gonna say, and replaying it again a couple years ago, getting to meet all the characters really felt like seeing people I had went to grade school with. I'm like, I remember you.
Oh dear.
I told you I got really attached to some of them.
Oh dear. That can't be good. Who are these characters you're referring to, anyways?
Well, Teo is one of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then Blue is this dragon that you recruit later on in the game, and he's the only dragon left of his kind, I believe. I can't actually remember. And he doesn't want to fight at first, and he's scared. He's hiding, and he's like, leave me alone. I want nothing to do with this. But then this little girl that he's friends with gets, like, she's in trouble, and then he just builds up all this courage, and he's like, no, I'm going to come. I'm going to help you fight. And he kind of, like, finds the courage that way. And so Blue was somebody I really responded to as a kid, but haven't used him in any of my recent playthroughs. He's not that good.
What about the things that you hated about the game? Surely there has to be something, anything. Nothing's perfect.
Little mechanical things like each character can only carry 4 items, and so if you have your main character open a treasure chest but his 4 items are full, you can't pick up the items, so you have to go through and manually change around who has what item in order to have enough room, and just like little things like that take a lot of time.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, sorry.
Maybe that's it.
Is that the only thing that you don't like about the game? I'm quite surprised because, like, I'm not saying if that's not the only thing, then and that's the only thing, that's fine. It's just I've always had people come on and say a lot more, which is nothing against you. I mean, I'm babbling again. What I'm trying to say is people have a list of issues, so like tons of them. So wow, I'm quite surprised. Like you. By that.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues with the second one.
Well,
But
yeah, go on.
But the first one it touches a lot of the important bases for me. Like, it has a pretty fair number of women characters that are strong and not just throwaways, and the story isn't as generically awful as it could be. Like in the second one, the princess is this helpless woman who can't do anything but get kidnapped and cries, but while she's being kidnapped, remarks about how cute your character is. And the first one just doesn't have those kinds of things. Like, the first one has a lot of very capable women characters who are unique and some are a little bit more sexualized than others and some aren't. And it's a great diversity of like characteristics that women can be. And they're not all healers, they're not all mages, they're not all centaurs. Like each class has both a more or less each class has like both a man and a woman you can be. And so I think because it ticks off that box for me, it's easy to love. And I can't really think of much that I hate about it.
Okay, well that's an interesting way to look at it.
Mm.
Fair enough. That's
I mean, and it has an armadillo in a tank suit. Like,
what?
I don't understand. His name's Gunt. Look him up. He's great.
Oh my god! As soon as I'm done here, I'm looking up everything about this game. I'm going to try and get a Mega Drive for this game. I'm going to have to try. So the game was co-developed between Climax and Camelot, and Camelot now, of course, went on to make, as well as the original Everybody's Golf for Sony, they made the Mario Sports games for Nintendo. But more importantly, perhaps, Golden Sun. Like, did you play much of Golden Sun at all?
I didn't actually.
Oh dear.
Sorry.
Well, that's a bit embarrassing for me. So that's kind of made that question redundant. So you mentioned that, of course, there is Shining Force, but you've mentioned yourself you played a bit of Final Fantasy. Are you much of a JRPG player?
I'm actually not. I get burnt out on JRPGs quite easily. I had been playing Bravely Default and Ni no Kuni within the past couple of years, and I think after maybe investing 10 hours into them, I was kind of done. They're just too long of a haul for me. I don't have the time or the attention span for JRPGs much anymore.
Ah, well, what about... Sorry, go on.
Oh, I did growing up. Like Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8 were maybe two of my most played games ever. So.
Oh, wow. Like, how many hours do you think you've put into them? Like, separately?
Years. Final Fantasy 8 became a very big obsession of mine to the point where I replayed it so many times that I wrote out all of the answers to the CD test that you have to take in order to pass your exams and go on. And because you actually have to take the test in game, I actually just wrote out the answers so that whenever I would get back to that point in another playthrough, I could just like speed through it and not have to worry about it.
What about a JRPG that I could probably call my favorite JRPG, and one that's kind of gotten a lot of talk over the past few years, for the lack of a better term, Persona 4. Is that anything that you've played?
No, but it's on my list actually, especially with Persona 5 coming out.
Ah, yes. Are you looking forward to Persona 5?
I am actually, and it's weird because I'm not usually into JRPGs, but I think having it on the 3DS might make it a little bit easier for me to... Well, I say that, but then I gave up Bravely Default, so I don't know.
You sure you don't mean Persona Q, or because Persona 5 is PS4 and PS3?
Oh yeah, sorry, I did confuse them. Shit. Well, that makes that moot. So.
Okay. Well,
I swear I'm a real gamer.
Oh dear. Well, we live and learn. So let's talk about other Shining Force games. You mentioned yourself that you also love Shining Force too, and in your email to me after I pitched you on this, you said you either want to talk about Shining Force 1 or 2. So, like, what is it that you love about Shining Force 2? Like,
it's this weird, it's not exactly a sequel in terms of following the narrative plot of the first one. It almost feels like they wanted to have a second shot at doing Shining Force 1 just with like slightly better graphics and a little bit better mechanics. So it's similar story in that you start off as a young kid named Max, who realizes that the world's in great danger and you have to grow up and kind of go through and fight and be the hero, and you're the chosen one. And so it doesn't exist in the same continuity per se. So and it even has like a lot of the same characters. Like in the first one, you have May, M-A-E, who is a centaur warrior who's super strong, and she's the daughter of your teacher who was a knight. And then in Shining Force 2, you have May, May, who is a centaur woman, super strong, but she used bows and arrows this time instead of lances. And so it's a lot of the same ideas, but done in what it seems like the developers think is a better way. And so the portraits of the characters are a little bit nicer and the animations are a little bit more nuanced. And so whereas in Shining Force 1, a lot of the characters of the same class are just palette swap versions of each other, which I actually think is to its credit. And so when you're watching combat sequences, you can't actually tell any of the genders apart for, like, say, the centaurs. So, like, May looks the exact same as Ken, just different colors. So it doesn't, like, stereotype in that sense. It's a constraint of the console or a constraint of the system at the time, which actually works for it. Whereas with Shining Force 2, they can do a little bit more stuff. So now, instead of being just a centaur who wears a helmet and is practical, May has this, like, long flowing blonde hair now and has, like, pink ribbons thrown off her. And so in what seems like trying to be an improvement upon the art, they actually introduced a lot more stereotypical artistic designs on part of the women characters, and that was a really big problem for me, I guess.
Like,
Yeah.
what other elements were you not a big fan of Shining Force 2?
The map system is so aggravating too, and so when you're on the world map, usually what you do is, like in Shining Force 1, you would just go from place to place with battles in between, and usually it would just span the size of one screen. Whereas Shining Force 2, you'll have to move beyond a couple screens, and it's so easy to get lost, and because there's no world map function, I've gotten lost and gone ahead in the storyline and missed something and had to backtrack, and just a lot of wasted time moving around on the world map. That is just really frustrating.
Oh god, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
The kind of thing that's just kind of popped up in my head. We've talked about how Shining Force has been influenced by games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Fire Emblem, but what do you think is the kind of influence Shining Force has had since its release on JRPGs? Maybe even RPGs as a whole.
I actually don't know if it's actually had an influence. I feel like out of the JRPGs released at the time, it's kind of more on the wayside. When you have games like Zelda and Final Fantasy that are so obviously influential to the medium and to the genre itself, that I really don't feel like Shining Force occupies that same kind of role. Or maybe it's just because I feel possessive of it and just want it to be my own special thing.
Interesting the way to look at it. It's just that kind of, really speaking, it is that, personal game.
Yeah, and I'm always so surprised when I find out other people play it who aren't my brothers.
What other Shining Force games did you really get into besides 1 and 2?
It was only the two, because I never had a Game Boy Advance, so I never played the remake.
When I was looking over the list, like, there was a couple more apparently, or am I wrong on that?
I don't know if they ever had a North America release. Because I know there was one that was only had a Japan release.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense then.
I think I could be wrong, but I think I recall.
Okay. I'm just double checking this, but no. Let me double check. Yeah, okay. Okay, it didn't. Okay. So I think it's safe to say, considering it was only just those two, we don't need to ask what were your top 3 Shining Force games, and we can probably just put the order in terms of favourite Shining Force games, as in 1 and 2.
Yes, it's very safe to say.
Very, very safe to say. Honorable mentions. Go for it.
Unreal, obviously.
Of course.
Fire Emblem Awakening, for so many of the same reasons as to why I love Shining Force 1. another game I mentioned earlier, Resident Evil Code Veronica. They're one of my all-time favorites. And then more recently, Borderlands 2. Unreal for the reasons that I had listed earlier. That it was the first really unique, my own game experience I had. And also just the setting itself, which was this beautiful fantasy yet major sci-fi game also, that put you on this whole other planet that you just got to explore and discover for yourself. And it was gorgeous. Some of the shots of the night sky and the different planets, it's a really stunning game, even given the time in between it was released. It was released in 1998, so the graphics were not as great as other games now, but I find it to be a still very gorgeous game. Code Veronica, because I love Claire Redfield. She was this awesome younger sister who was a student and rode a motorcycle, and when her brother went missing, went to go find him, and was just capable and strong and smart and also badass. And the opening cutscene of Code Veronica is her breaking into an umbrella facility and being confronted by a whole bunch of guards, and then she goes to drop her gun because she has her hands in the air, and then falls down to the side, picks it up, and shoots a gas can and blows everybody up. And it was just so cool, and it won me over immediately.
I was going to say, are you going to play Resident Evil Revelations 2?
I probably will.
Ah.
I've had a bit of a falling out with Resident Evil games just because they kind of lost a lot of what I loved about them, but I'd be willing to give it a try.
Ah, okay. Like, how do you think the series has fared since 4? Because everyone dolls over 4, but like you said, it's kind of gone downhill.
Yeah, well, and I didn't really love Operation Raccoon City either. I feel like the focus has become a lot more on
action.
Shooting. Yeah, versus exploration, versus horror, versus actually trying to scare you. Because Code Veronica was terrifying in a lot of really genuine ways, in the way that it looked at like human mutation beyond just zombies. And how it takes away so much, like it takes away characters that you develop feelings for and mutates them into awful, horrible monsters that you then have to fight.
I was going to say as well, I thought Resident Evil 4 was fantastic, as it obviously is, but people say Resident Evil kind of fell downhill from there, but I'm of the opinion that I really love Resident Evil 5. Okay, love is perhaps too strong, but I really liked Resident Evil 5.
Yeah, and I can see that. I think it's just what people, like, the expectations you bring into a game and what you want from it, and if it doesn't deliver what you're wanting from it, it's hard to forgive that. And I don't necessarily think that's unfair in a series to kind of, you buy a series because you want this particular style or you want this atmosphere. And so I think when that's not delivered, no matter how good of a game it is always going to feel like a disappointment.
Absolutely. Although with that said, as much as I like 5, 6 was an absolute putrid pile of shite. it really was. Sorry, but I digress. I pulled you off course.
Oh yes, my other favorite honorable mentions: Fire Emblem Awakening, which I love being able to hook my characters up to make them stronger on battle. Although I do wish that you could have same-sex relationships, because the dudes are so boring to date in that game. But yeah, it's top-down strategy. So, and then Borderlands, which I adore because I love the art style, and I love how it doesn't take itself seriously, and how it's this very big, you must save the world from evil, but you're kind of a lackluster hero, you're not the good guy, and everything's more or less a joke at its own expense.
Just that kind of self-humor.
And the guns. I'm a girl who loves a variety of guns. And so I love elemental weapons, and I love being able to fight enemies with a corrosive SMG in one hand and then incendiary pistol in the other, because I play as the Gunzerker who can wield two guns at once. So it's a really great game for just wanting to go and shoot a lot of things and collect a lot of money.
Have you played Tales from the Borderlands at all?
I have, actually.
What did you think?
It's weird because I played it right after finishing Borderlands the pre-sequel, and so I didn't actually love Tales as much just because it took place in the same setting, right? So it was using Hyperion and it was looking at that kind of capitalist company trying to more or less monetize weapons and destruction of the earth. And so I was already kind of bored of Hyperion after finishing the prequel, and so I didn't really love Tales because it just felt more of the same. Like I had already gotten so much of the mind operating behind Hyperion and why it was what it was with Tales of with the prequel. So I think I just wanted it to be something else, like exploring more of the world, exploring more of what the Vault Hunters had to offer, exploring more of their personal back histories, exploring different ones, creating new characters, and I don't know. Maybe if I hadn't played it right on the heels of the pre-sequel, I would feel differently.
That's a interesting perspective because, like, I'm not a really massive hardcore Borderlands fan. Like, I have, Borderlands 1 and 2, but I bought episode 1 on a whim because I heard how good it is, and even though I'm not the biggest Borderlands fan, so I figured at £4, why not? And like I said, I'm not the biggest Borderlands fan, but even then, I really enjoyed it. Massively enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I've actually heard that from a lot of people who aren't really into the Borderlands franchise actually really dug the Telltale version of it.
Yeah, I was. So what I was trying to say is, like, there can be room there for even the hardest, or not the hardest, but like the casualist of fans for something like Tales from the Borderlands, even if you're not a die-hard fan of the series already. I think that's one of the neat things I really enjoy about, or what I've enjoyed so far from Tales from the Borderlands, and what Telltale have done really well. In fact, another example as well, I don't read the comics or I don't watch the TV show, but I really loved season 1 of The Walking Dead and how Telltale kind of made me feel welcome into that. It's the same way they did it with Tales from the Borderlands as well.
Yeah, and it's really cool too because what Telltale does is it takes an existing universe and then just like further explores what's capable in that universe. And Borderlands, because I heard a lot of people were curious as to why Telltale would pick Borderlands to do this, and I think it's because people don't know how rich and how full and how well created the world of Borderlands is actually done. And so throughout the first 3 games by Gearbox, there is such immense detail in the world building that you could easily make as many offshoots if you wanted, just exploring what's possible in that world and based off the characters, or even imagining new characters in there. Like, it's so fully formed and fully functioning that it's easy to kind of pull apart what you want from it and to make other things from it. Like Walking Dead, like Game of Thrones.
I've yet to admittedly still play Game of Thrones, so
yeah, I'm not into the series at all, so
yeah.
I probably won't pick it up.
Yeah, I have the season 1 Blu-ray actually, still waiting to be played after about 3 years, and yet I have not put it into my PS4 or whatever Blu-ray player I have. So, oops, that's a big oopsie on me. So if I had to guess what your top 3 games ever were, I would have to say Shining Force 1, Shining Force 2, and Unreal?
Yeah, I would probably not put Shining Force 2 in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would probably actually swap Shining Force 2 out for Borderlands 2.
Wow, okay.
I actually really, really love the Borderlands franchise. Because of what I just said, like that it's this fully functioning world that has all these details, and like you can imagine it existing when you're not playing. Like it feels so real, and it's so interesting, and it's so nuanced, and it's so deep that there's just so much going on in it. And like listening to the character banter when you're doing missions just reveals these fully created characters with opinions, with unique character traits.
That is a kind of gobsmacking shocker, I'll be honest.
And it has queer characters, it has bisexual characters, it has characters of color. It's diverse in so many ways. That's really kind of refreshing.
I think, yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think you've kind of sold me on trying Borderlands 2 again.
Yes. If not for Shining Force, at least for Borderlands 2.
It wasn't for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. Although admittedly, I'm going to wait now until the PS4 collection comes out.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair.
Or the Xbox One version, whatever version I'm going to get. Let's move on then to your games, shall we say? And more. So you make a lot of Twine games from my kind of search background.
I do. I really, really love Twine games. I had actually downloaded RPG Maker to try to make my own 90s style top-down RPG game. But I love writing, and my degrees are in writing, and creative writing is kind of my my home. So Twine really lets me meld those two passions of mine, like games and writing.
I was gonna say, you mentioned how you first tried an RPG Maker and tried to make your own kind of 90s RPG. The first thought I said, she's making a Shining Force remake.
Oh my god, I could.
Well,
I mean, I might as well give it another shot.
Wow, like not unless Sega goes cease and desist, stop. So yeah, sorry, I was probably interrupting. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, so yeah, I love Twine as a platform, and so I've probably made 2 full solo Twine games, 2 kind of mini ones that were done for other projects, and then I produced and edited the collaboration Lights Out Please, which was done in Twine.
Let's talk about Lights Out Please. That was a very interesting game on concept, anyways, when I first heard of it. So yeah, talk about Lights Out Please.
So Lights Out Please is a collaborative horror game that is basically structured like you're sitting around a campfire with different people and you're telling each other stories, and so each story more or less mimics a traditional or typical urban legend or ghost story. And so the menu is composed of like, oh, the one about the black Cadillac, or the one about blah blah blah. Like, so it's kind of mimicking this oral history, and it's made up of different writers who are telling specific stories about a kind of fear that they feel. And so I had wanted to be this safe space for marginalized creators to get together and to just like tell a story about how they experience fear in their daily lives.
Like you said, it was a big list of contributors. So as well as yourself, like who else was on working or who contributed to the game?
Yes, so Kitty Horror Show contributed, Porpentine contributed, Jericho Bull contributed, a whole bunch of others like John R. Ceratops, or at Ceratops on Twitter, contributed. Carly Velacci contributed. A coworker of mine contributed, Vicky He, and so it's this really cool mixture of people who have made tons of games before, like Kitty and like Porpentine, to people who have never made a game or never written anything creative before, like Vicky He, and so it's a really cool mixture of new and old game makers.
A diverse mix of old and new developers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool to hear. And as was, I'm sure, being nominated for several awards at the Canadian Video Game Awards, right?
That was super cool. And to my knowledge, we are the only Twine game ever nominated for a CVA.
Wow, that kind of makes it even more impressive.
Well, I mean, I didn't research into this. I'm just assuming. But.
So what's next? What's the next projects coming from you? I mean, like we were talking earlier, like you're doing a game jam just before we came on, but yeah, what's next for Kaitlin Tremblay? And
so I'm working on this one game called Say When right now, and it is I'm billing it as a sci-fi body horror fairy tale. Yeah, and so it's in line with my focus on mental health activism and talking about these kinds of experiences. Yeah, and so I'm doing that as part of the Dames Making Games game jam this weekend, Feb Fatale 3, Killer Interfaces. So hopefully that will be done by the end of the month and people can play it.
Oh, cool! That's fantastic. So kind of another question I have in mind, like, how, how do you see the kind of rise in Twine games? Because like they've kind of exploded over, I would say, at least over this past year or so.
Yeah, I would say it's been a couple of years building where it's just been this incredible influx of diverse creators using this free to use, low barrier to access platform to kind of tell their stories, whatever stories that is that they want to tell, whether it's a personal thing, whether it's a sci-fi thing, whether it's horror. And it's really cool because it gives a lot of power to people who may feel voiceless or may feel like they don't have a platform to speak. And so it gives people that place.
Mm.
And I feel like that is a really um, it's a good thing that people have latched onto this way to tell their stories, the way to tell their stories in their own words and not wait for other people to do it.
Mm. Like what other Twine games have you personally enjoyed that you could perhaps put on as kind of your favorite Twine games?
Oh, yes, absolutely. My favorite are Rokashi's I'm Fine, which is a look at having depression, and Soha Kareem's Reprogram, which is this really great game about kink and PTSD. And also Merritt Kopas's Consensual Torture Simulator is a really great game about consent and BDSM. And JV, oh my God, I can't say his name, JV, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. JV Glatney's Terror Aboard the Speedwell is this beautiful sci-fi game. You can find me on Twitter at Kate underscore Zilla, so KAIT underscore ZILLA. And also you can find all my games at thatmonstergames.com.
Thanks for listening to my favourite game. Next week, Matthew Reynolds on Shenmue. Until next week, bye bye.